Hello, everyone. Happy time zone wherever you are in the world. We thank you for being back with us at Elevation Mindset. Today, we are talking about moving from saboteur to intentionality. We want to kind of start you off with a couple of questions. And this is going to be an interactive experience for us. We actually want to hear your feedback. And I know that many of you in the Lifebook community and in the world can be really interactive with us. And we really enjoy that because this is a two-way conversation. But really where we want to start is, what are the three highest values that you hold? For those of you who have done a lot of this personal development work, you will actually kind of have those at your fingertips, but we're curious, what are your highest values? If you can actually type those in the chat for us, that would be fantastic. Because for us, many of the things we talk about really come back to our beliefs and our values. And are they serving us, and are we living up to even our own values? So Suzanne, what would you say your top three values are while people are typing in the chat?
For me, I think three of my top values are contribution. I think another one would be, it's funny. Immediately what came to mind is three words that all relate to contribution. So I think that one's like really strong. Immediately words like service, impact, all of those relate to contribution though. So I think that's probably going to be my highest value. I think another one of them is, and it's hard to articulate this, but something about living your intentions. It's authenticity, I think, is where I would go with that. And I think another one of them is simply love. To be loving in all that we are and all that we do. In the heart of my contribution is love. The heart of my relationships is love. The heart of my outreach is love. The heart of my self-care is love. So it infiltrates and permeates everything about the other things that we prioritize in life for me. What about you, Michael?
So for me, compassion is certainly up there at the top. So that compassion for myself and for others. And that certainly encompasses, yes, love, but also things like forgiveness and gratitude is also up in there. And the compassion to being able to put myself in someone else's shoes and realizing that we are all on this human journey. We all have and make mistakes. And as we learn from them, we get to grow. One of the other ones for me is actually humor, is that I do my best not to take myself too seriously. So that humor comes from that place of humility. Many times the jokes that I make are at my own expense. But that is another one of those things that to me is a core value, is because we can be serious all day long, but if we're not enjoying life, are we really feeling fulfilled? And then the last one that kind of in my top three, I think, would be impeccability. So impeccability to me is doing the best that you can with the resources and knowledge you have at the time. So that means showing up 100% where you're at, because I don't believe in, I'm going to do it 110%. I'm going to do it 150%. It's 1,000%, because there's only one me. And if I give more than I have to give, then I'm also then sacrificing myself to a point that I cannot continue showing up for other people. Mm-hmm. So impeccability kind of encompasses those aspects for me, and it plays out. It probably comes from the teachings of Don Miguel Ruiz about being impeccable with your word and saying what you mean and meaning what you say. So those are really the big things that show up for me.
As Michael and I were talking about this question, we also wanted you to note the distance between what your values are and where you are now. Because while we may have these values, sometimes we don't live them to the full, or we're a work in progress and we're not there yet. And so where we are, believe it or not, sometimes more accurately reflects our values than these beautiful, grandiose words that come out of us. When it comes down to it, our decisions, our behaviors are really the most ultimate reflection of our values.
So, and why do we bring up values in this? And I think it as we are talking about this subject of moving from saboteur to intentionality is why this is kind of the foundation of we ascribe to these higher ideas, but we have this own internal saboteur that actually many times, for various reasons, which we'll be kind of digging into as this conversation unfolds, of acting against our own values, rather than living intentionally in the direction of them. And I see some great examples here, other than the ones we've brought forth, of being kind, confident, and courageous, or freedom, family, and compassion. Each of those is a powerful value to hold. And we each get an opportunity to choose. I think that there's someone who has taken an inventory of the values that are possible. There's like 168 that are possible. That seems like a lot. But each of us, it's a various flavor of what our values look like. But how do your actions, are you intentionally choosing your actions based on your values? And that's really what we want to dig into.
Yeah, and that's the goal, right? We know where we're going, but let's talk about where we are. Let's talk about where we are a little bit. So, what kinds of sabotage have you experienced? Michael and I were talking about this, and we thought, sabotage is sabotage, but is it? And we came up with really two different types of sabotage. Michael, do you want to go into the first type?
Sure. Yes. So I think that in many ways, the first one is the one that's the more, whenever I think of self-sabotage, tends to be the one that shows up more often, at least for me. It's that unintentional sabotage, that in that time of lack of consciousness about what we're doing. And the various ways that we've seen that show up, and certainly for me, is some of that is inherited. It's actually from the patterns of what we learn from our others, our culture, our family, our spiritual teachings, etc. It's those things that get ingrained and almost conditioned or programmed into us, and then we play by that playbook over time. But then there's also this, not even just a lack of consciousness, but a lack of knowledge, a lack of awareness, a lack of knowing what the proper step is. And then the last one, at least that I know was my biggest challenge, was actually getting into a rut, getting to a pattern. There's a lot of value in consistency. If the track that you're on is heading in the direction where you want to go, rather than slowly creeping you over the side of the cliff and going down. What about that other side, Suzanne? Because you seem to be the example more of the other kind of sabotage.
Well, and let's go into examples though of the first two. Like we talked about the inherited ones. I think we all know what that's like. We all inherit some patterns. We've seen generations of people that inherit, some bad behaviors, some bad beliefs. The stuff is deep. What about examples of lack of knowledge, where the people are just ignorant? You've all seen people where it's like, oh, do they know where they're heading?
Right. I certainly have experienced that too. Is the person who it's when we're little, I've seen, and I've been guilty of this as well, is keeping my daughter from actually experiencing something so she won't get hurt. However, as we do that thing and get hurt, we learn not to do it. So it's almost like this this theme of, I'm going to do it anyway so I can get the pain, because that then makes it sink in more. But I know one of the biggest examples when we were first talking about this was with Tina Turner, who passed away recently. Is she wasn't aware how much her blood pressure impacted the health of her kidneys. It was outside of her knowledge. And afterwards, as she kind of knew in her final days, she related back as, I wish I knew more about that, of keeping that in check and what potential outcome could come from that. Certainly. So, and I know for me, as far as unintentional ruts, like I said, being on that path and actually it's slowly taking me off the trail is the biggest example in my life. And it was in this habit of seeking connection with people regardless of the consequences. And that led me to a very, very dark place. And that very dark place had major consequences that I'm still actually recovering from. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge every single day. It's something that comes up for me all the time. And it made me question who I was because of the rut that I'd fallen into and the actions that I was taking because of that experience. I was acting outside of what I would consider my character. Even, the words that would come out of my mouth about who I was, that's not how I was acting.
And certainly not in alignment with those values you talked about just now.
Absolutely. And some of that, I think, comes from, at least for me, was getting into a cycle of negativity and looking for something positive. But at least for me is in that seek, regardless of the consequences, there's always going to be consequences. Sometimes those consequences you're okay with, and sometimes those consequences are not. So as an example, I know one of the people wrote in the chat here about that idea of freedom. Well, there's a dark side of all these values as well, is I want the freedom to eat whatever I want. I'm in that camp too. I want to be able to choose what I eat. But I've also taken WildFit as a course, as a workshop. And one of the things that he talks about in that is, yes, I want the freedom to eat whatever I want. But do I have the freedom to not eat that thing in front of me that I know is actually not good for my health?
Exactly.
So, and that is probably one of those places where I am sabotaging myself now that, I'm at the size that I am. My goal is to actually get in a better state of health and be making better choices. But then cookies, cake, all those things that are like, but they taste so good. And it is a matter of me remembering that the feelings that I want to feel are not necessarily going to be what comes up when I'm eating it, especially if I feel like junk after I've eaten it. So then we kind of come back is, how do we then practice our values in a way that is allowing us to grow, allowing us to actually get closer to and that's another piece too, when we're talking about values, is what is your definition of that value? What does freedom mean to you? What does compassion mean to you? Because I could, just by my own definition of it, could actually be what leads me to that sabotage towards it. Because if compassion is actually only conditional, what conditions am I willing to give it?
So, and if you guys have been with Michael and I more than 2 seconds, you also know, and I'm a repeat offender in this, is that I believe all roads lead to our inherent belief about who we are. All of this stuff is identity deep. And so if you always believe, Michael, that you're going to be a big guy, that you're going to struggle with weight, that's your self-imposed identity. And it may have been, reinforced by your family. It may have been reinforced by society. Society sometimes does not help. We would love to think we live in a benevolent world, but this stuff is work. And it's okay. It's okay that it's work. This is how we grow muscle. This is how we choose those things. So yeah, I have the freedom to choose healthy things, or I am a force of good. I am a force of health. I am a force of longevity. I deserve to be here. I deserve to live a long, healthy life. I believe my body is a powerful being, a powerful channel for all that I want to do and be. So how we love ourselves is so important in this. Sabotage shows up. So Michael went through all the unintentional types. And really, for me, what came up more were the intentional, like, let's throw a monkey wrench in there, which sounds crazy, but we do it all the time. One example that we came up with was imposter syndrome. Yes. When we know we don't really believe we're good enough. We know we don't really believe we can do it. We know. And so we hold back. We bite our tongue. We don't take that step. We don't invest in ourselves. I'm not an athlete. I'm not going to go to the gym. I'm going to instead engage in this sabotage behavior. I'm not a powerful coach that can change lives. I don't know. I don't believe in myself. So we have the imposter syndrome. The other, another kind was, and guys, it happens, destroying to rebuild, where we intentionally sabotage a path because we're unhappy. Something's not authentic. Maybe we're not living the life that we feel that was meant to be. Whatever that is, sometimes you got to throw a monkey wrench in it and blow it all up. And it's risky, but you know, there is that phrase, burn the boats. And sometimes that's the path that people take. And the third kind that we talked about was the thermometer effect, where when you, no matter how high you strive to be, no matter how much you succeed, eventually you return to a status quo. And that status quo is not optimal. We call this the thermometer effect because you have a setting, and no matter how high or low you temporarily go, you return to that setting temperature. And that tells us, again, tied back to your beliefs and your identity, you may have money, you may be successful, and then it blows up. You may lose a lot of weight and be really fit for 2 years, and then it blows up. You may be in a great relationship and it blows up. We've all known people who have these cyclical times that we see them back in the same place again. What is it that's holding them there? It's sabotage.
That other example of that thermometer effect is the person who keeps dating the same person over and over again, even though it's a different body and a different name, but it's the same attributes. And it's something that was a toxic relationship the first time as much as it was the 6th or the 7th.
Yeah, and that can be inherited. That can be based on patterns of family. It can be all of these things together. It's definitely another sabotage cycle. Good one, Michael. Really good. So can you guys relate to any of this? Does any of this sound familiar to you? You know, when we were talking about it, we were also thinking that, you know, not everybody, we've all known people where we're like, we love them, we see where it's heading. And for some reason, they don't see it. Michael, have you known people like that?
Yeah, I certainly have. I certainly have people in my universe that I see that coming up over and over again, where they just keep falling into the same experience, the same interaction for sure. And it's because we also kind of when we were looking at kind of how to identify this, sometimes it can be really sneaky. It can sneak up on you. And other times it's actually an abrupt, it's like, oh, there it is again. But I think that in some ways it's tough, because as a coach, I want to find people that are ready to make a change. So it tends not to be the person who has not discovered the fact that they're sabotaging themselves. It definitely requires someone to at least have that one spark of enlightenment of, wow, this isn't working for me and I need help. And that can be one of the biggest challenges. And the challenge is actually as much on my side as on theirs, is because I can coach somebody, I can actually ask them questions, but if they're not ready, if they don't see that there's something off in the first place, it may actually be like pulling the carpet out from underneath them, and not in a good way. So I think that there's this opportunity for us to be a mirror for other people, but it's that some of the concern is actually having it be more of a traumatic experience to point it out to somebody than the experience that they're in. But do you have friends that are close enough to you that they're willing to go there with you?
So true. I always say it's important to have friends who don't accept you as you are. And I know that runs counter to every single other person practically on the planet. But I want somebody who sees all that I can be. I want someone who's going to call me out when I'm hitting my head against the wall, but I don't know why. I want that person that can have that real talk with me. That's the kind of love I need in my life. Not the one that will bring me the Band-Aid for the boo-boo. I mean, that's nice and all, but let's stop the cycle. So, and I do that for my friends too. Show up for them, call it out. And Michael, I have to say, it hurts people sometimes. Real talk. I've been the person to do the tough love in a lot of situations, and it hurts. And it hurts me to even see them hurting because I'm an empath. But it hurts me more to know they could continue on that cycle and never reach their potential. In one of my favorite law of attraction books with Esther Hicks, it says, one of the greatest gifts you can give someone is your high expectation of them. The world will lower your expectations and tell you it's fine. Not for me. We're all here because we know there's something more inside. We know there's something we were meant to be. We know that there is a path that we are supposed to be on. And, thank God for you guys. You're investing in who you are and who you want to be. These are the kinds of people for me. So what are the signs? Sometimes we don't realize. What does that sign look like, Michael?
So the biggest one that I like pointing out is this idea of the I'll be happy when sabotage. It's that I'll take action when I'm putting this off into the future until this thing is in place. And even in one of the programs, I really kind of dug into this is, for me, my belief is happiness isn't something that you get from something, it's something you bring to it. So to me, that sabotage space is that I will be happy when, which is a little bit different than kind of the goal setting structure, is getting that dopamine hit because you hit the checkbox. But is your happiness connected with you doing the things? Or are you happy because you're enjoying the journey? So another one, which we've already touched on too, another one of those big signs is that friend that you talk to and it's a year later and the stories are exactly the same. They're still in the same place, even though you haven't seen them in 3, 6, 9 months, a year. It's one of the things that I think Vishen Lakhiani talks about, is that we want you to grow so much by doing our programs that in 3 months people don't recognize you because of how much growth you're taking in moving and discovering who you are in your life.
Mm.
Another one that I know that a sign for me is that idea of escapism, that getting into either the scroll on social media or binging some show on TV where you're consuming rather than creating. For others, it's gaming. So if it's playing social media games or even, local games, when you're actually, these devices are powerful tools, sometimes for
Yeah.
distraction,
Yes,
many times for
guys, he's
distraction.
calling out our scrolling, our streaming. He's calling out, if I could just XYZ, then ABC. Be careful with this stuff. It's bad.
Mhm.
It's bad. These are really good signs. One of the things that I brought up too was just your friends. You lose your friends, guys. People grow. And I watched this happen to two people I love, but specifically a family member, where he self-sabotaged himself horribly. And all of his best friends went on with their life. They weren't going to stay there in that rut with him. And they loved him. And 20 years later, they reach out to find him because they love him. And he's still in that rut. Guys, pay attention to the cycles of your friendships. We know when this is happening. And we may want to keep ourselves busy, by the way, which is another sabotage behavior, busyness, mindless busyness, or everything but the point busyness. But we know, and to get back to that busyness, one form of sabotage that may not look like it is simply playing too small, staying in your comfort zone when you know you were meant to grow, sacrificing all those dreams because you're safe right here. And safe doesn't look bad. Safe doesn't make you a bad person. But safe is not your potential.
There's a couple of other examples of that busyness too. So, and this is one that I've seen and done my best to curb from, is the idea of procrastinating. The idea of going out to learn something that's not going to ever be something I'm going to apply, just so I can have that certificate. I can say I've completed it. That it's a distraction. It's a positive distraction in some ways, but is it?
Mm-hmm.
It is that procrastinating by learning something new is. So I do my best at this point kind of to counterbalance that by, where am I going to apply this?
Mm-hmm.
But perfectionism is also another one of those examples of busyness. If you have to take something to the point of it being perfect, that is another saboteur. The perfectionism is sabotage too, because my experience has been that nothing is ever perfect. That you can get into the point of good enough in many cases, or being impeccable, but perfectionism is another sign of that. I'm not going to do this until it's perfect, is another example of playing small. It's another example of putting it off.
So true, guys. And a lot of these are, they're excuses to execution. They're excuses for inaction on the core goal that we know we're meant to achieve. So perfect. Michael, you also had food.
Yeah, that's certainly one of those two that I've found is that the idea of either binging on it or actually using that as a distraction. So
Mhm.
for me, that has been something that I've fallen into.
And I might move
In
that into the escape category.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
certainly. So,
Mhm.
and one thing I did want to kind of add a little bit more detail to as well is when our friends fall away,
Mm.
sometimes it's because we're outgrowing them. Sometimes it's because they're outgrowing us.
That.
And both of those, one can be helpful if they are someone who's holding you back. But if as you said, the person who you can see cares and adores you, and they're doing something similar to what you're doing and they're moving away from you, that may be a sign that your foot is actually in concrete, that you are actually stuck where you're at
Or
rather
you're
than
not
moving in the
doing what they're
direction.
doing, and you know you
Mhm.
should be.
Mhm. Yeah.
Definitely.
So, and I want to kind of bring forward what was written in the chat here too, which I love this idea is that our friends many times see who we can be, but family keeps their old vision of where we are at and want to keep us there because they understand us better when we stay there.
Mhm.
And it's many reasons why, and we'll be getting into some of the tools or steps later, is accountability partners as family rarely works, if ever.
Mhm.
Same thing for a partner, a love partner as well as an accountability partner.
Yeah.
It's a chemistry for disaster. So,
So
but
true. Very cool.
uh,
Guys, how is this hitting? What are you feeling and thinking? How is sabotage showing up for you? Yes, to busyness. Ooh, we know so many people. I am in my first day of, and I've done this before, I am banning all binging and streaming for the month of July. So for me, that's a distraction. And it's not scrolling for me, but I will spend 2 hours on something. And oh my gosh, that time I'll never get back. Business to busyness, yes. Minutia, guys. We'll get all hung up on the minutia. And that's not where the gold is. So we talked about how to recognize it. We talked about these examples. But what the heck do you do? Where does it start? The decision, where does it all begin, Michael?
so I think, especially since we kind of talked about the different types of sabotage, that many times that first step is recognizing the pain that you're in, recognizing where you are not listening, where you're not aware that you're out of alignment. So it starts by really identifying the pain, identifying for us that this is missing. Wow, I've just spent the last 5 nights in a row watching Netflix for 3 hours each night. And at the same time, that project that I said that I wanted to get done by the end of the week, I haven't even touched.
Exactly.
Uh-oh. So it does start with the recognition of the pain first.
Yeah,
Because
and
if we
guys,
don't feel it,
oh, go ahead.
go.
We we use this light example, but we know there's real stuff going on. We know sometimes it's a lot bigger stuff. And that busyness is so we don't stop and look in the mirror long enough to let it get to us.
Mhm.
But we know. And then so this first step of like recognizing you're in pain is about that moment you finally slow down, look yourself in the eye, where you realize it's the end of your night and you still haven't gotten what you needed done for the umpteenth time. And it's the distance between those values you thought of and beautifully shared and where you are now. This is the pain. It's the distance.
Yep. And it's, in my opinion, it's necessary to be aware of that, and even many times describe what that pain is. Slow down, and maybe it is write it out. Maybe it is actually talk to a friend or a coach or a colleague or a therapist and describe what that pain feels like. But I think that we need to kind of get into that and feel what that is doing to us in comparison to our potential before we can decide to make the decision to move away from it. Because it is a decision.
It is, guys. I mean, I've had those moments where I look at myself and say, Suzanne, you will never get to your goal if you continue like this. And it hurts. It hurts. But guys, that's where your power comes in. Because you were meant for this. You were meant for that goal. Those goals don't come from nowhere. That's not shit you just make up. It was meant for just you. It was meant for you. So don't blow it off. That was gifted to you, for you to accomplish, for you to do. And that might help you make that decision, which Michael and I agree is that second most critical thing after you recognize enough. Decide, 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 decide. Tony Robbins talks about it as like the most powerful crucible moment is the decision. Because there's not ifs, ands, or buts in a decision. Is there, Michael?
Nope, is to decide to cut away, to remove from possibility is what a decision is supposed to be. I take it to the level of calling it a commitment, is committing to do something different.
Commit, decide. So when are you going to decide? I say decisions go to your identity, who you claim you are meant to be.
Yeah. And then I think that what we kind of came up with is there's another step before we start planning to go to where we want to be. So we've decided we're going to move away from something. So this is where we don't want to be. And then we've made that decision moment. But then we feel that you then have to dig into those values that we just talked about, that you say is who you are, and really define those for you. How do they show up? What does it look like for you? And why is it so, or why are those values so important to you? Because that then gives us the fuel to take off. It gives us the launching capability to get off the ground, which
and
many
it
times it may take a little while to get there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
like guys, we know you're going to explore. We know where we don't want to go, but we're not quite sure the next step for us. So we explore. We try things on. This fits, this doesn't fit, this feels good, this feels amazing. This is where I'm meant to be. And you're going to feel it. We talk about your emotions as your GPS. Use that system that was gifted to you. And as you, after you make that decision and you know, I'm not going to hurt myself anymore. I'm not going to hurt my potential anymore. I'm not going to hurt my body anymore. Then you start navigating and feeling your way. And you're going to know. It may not be like the nicest. For me, sometimes it's sweaty. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's at the gym. Sometimes it's early mornings. Sometimes it's drinking kale. Right? You should see the shit I drink, guys. ground up ginger roots, ground up turmeric roots, ground up kale. But I do it because I'm immune compromised. I do it because I have a choice to live healthy. And I was born for that. I can do this. Diagnosed with a rare, potentially fatal blood disease. What else you got? We were made for this, guys. Whatever it is, you got this. So you navigate, you figure out what feels right. And then you call someone like Michael because he's going to help you plan. Talk about planning.
So to me, that planning phase is as much about bringing all that other stuff we've actually talked about up to this point, discovering and describing the pain, deciding you want to move away from it. You've got your values decided and defined of where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a matter of, yes, exploring and researching. So what are the possible steps that we have out there? Because there's so many different ways we can get there at this point, and so many different people who have different ways to get there. But as we talk about in the Lifebook community, strategies are unique to the person.
Mm-hmm.
It may work fantastically well for me, and it may work horribly for you. You've got a different history, a different psychology, a different physiology than I do. But it really is a matter of pulling those pieces out and actually deciding, once again, what is the next step you're going to take. What's the experiment you're going to do now? And break it down to the one next step you're going to take. And being willing to actually have it be an experiment and have it be something that this is the goal we're aiming for, but also be willing to actually learn the lesson that we're going to get while actually breaking it down into those smaller pieces. Because that, unfortunately, if we try to climb, Everest overnight, it's not going to happen. If we try to eat the elephant whole, it doesn't happen. We don't have the capabilities to do that, at least at this point. It really is a matter of, deciding what is the bite you're going to take. What is the step you're going to take? What's the path that is going to actually lead you because of the capabilities you have right now and with the possibility for growth? And that's really kind of the place that I like to play is, okay, we've now have this field of choices, listening to your body, listening to your emotions, listening to your spirit. Each person has a different way of actually getting that message back. I noticed Yvonne pointed in here is that physical pain can be a guide to our emotional pain. And for some people, that is the route they have to go. In my opinion, that is the most extreme of the messages you get. So if you waited till the physical pain, it may be, you may be pretty far down that path. I'm doing my best now to learn the lessons at the emotional space instead, and hopefully to the spiritual space eventually too, so I can actually listen to that guidance and get there without going down that dark alley where you get stabbed and mugged and feeling the physical pain, knowing full well ahead of time that that was not the place that you needed to walk. So, but unfortunately, I think that all of us in our lives are going to have a time of having to go to that shadowy, dark place to know what you're capable of. And that's why I think that the planning phase is so necessary once we've had the pain. Because until you've experienced that pain, you don't really have the fuel to plan to get out of it. For me, I waited until my 30s to actually really have that deep, dark night of the soul. I mean, to the point that I was in jail for it, which is never a good feeling. Whenever you have actually had that freedom we talked about completely taken away from you by my own choices. And that was the time whenever it's like, okay, reset my life. This is not where I want to be. This is not how I want to live my life. And I got a chance to do those first 3 or 4 steps because I had nothing else to do. I hope that everyone out there right now doesn't have to go to that extreme in order to get the lessons that it requires in order to be able to plan to go a different direction.
That's right. And I hope you can learn from others. That's why we show up, because we don't want you to hit those rocks and hit all the way down. I mean, I know I'm seeing now, and I know it's trendy though, because I'm in the health community. There are like 13-year-olds and 15-year-olds that are now talking about anti-aging. The rest of us, it wasn't a trend, but we're also idiots. We don't think about this stuff until our bodies start falling apart. We don't take that U-turn and realize, oops, this is the wrong direction, until we fuck up. A lot of times, guys, it's okay. I mean, we're all idiots in some way. That's okay. We're all also brilliant beings of light. It's okay. You're here now. Let's go. And so, people like Michael help you with planning the new direction. And really, Michael, you talked a lot about the commitment to that path.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that, where you're planning the direction versus committing to that path.
To me, at least in kind of how I work through things, is preparation is before a commitment. It really is that research phase. It's that planning. It is that figuring out what are the possible steps. But at some point, you need to actually like pull the lever to the direction you're going to go. And to me, that's at the point of commitment. Commitment is what makes a promise into reality for me. It is that this is the path I'm going on this duration of time until I'm done or I'm dead, essentially. This is the path that I'm going. And that level of all in is different than a promise. It's different than an interest. It's different. To me, it's even beyond that level of being decided on something.
Mm.
You're not interested anymore. You are committed in this.
Mm.
And unfortunately, like I said, many times we have to hit that pain point before we can get to the level of commitment to get out of it and get away from it. Because otherwise it seems intangible. And to me, a commitment is that much more tangible step. That could be the contract that you write out with yourself, can be that level of commitment. And if that's what it takes to get it in your head of this is the level that I'm investing in myself, do that. Please, and make that commitment to yourself and the world that you're going to bring the gift that you have to give from your experience, from the wisdom that you gained, from the spirit that you are out into the world.
And then
it's
what?
Needed. And we do talk about this in the life book framework as well. It's great that we have a direction we're going. The next step really is tracking your progress. Mm-hmm. How did this experiment go? And if that's actually a scoreboard you're going to keep, if that's a journal you're writing it in, if it's in a structure like Coda or Notion or Evernote or something like that, if it's just a chart you're actually going to write up, track your progress on where you're going towards that. Because unfortunately, if you don't measure it, if you measure something, it's just about guaranteed to grow in the direction you want it to go, because you know how far you've come and how far left you have to go.
I think there's another level to that too, guys. If we're measuring it, we're putting our energy there. Mm-hmm. And that's their law of attraction working. Mm-hmm. And that's the power of pulling the universe into our design as well. I do believe we can impact the universe. We impact design every day in the decisions we make. And I believe energy has that power too. As you're tracking the progress, you're reinforcing an idea. And the energy that goes towards that also helps attract that dynamic. So I love that. And then what's the last one you have, Michael?
So it is, once again, so we've committed to this direction. We're now tracking that we're heading in that direction. But then that is that North Star we're talking about. It's actually intentionally making all the rest of our choices heading in that direction. Mm-hmm. If I'm actually going to be flexible, my intention needs to be that I'm stretching. I'm doing exercises that are going to allow me to be flexible. As we're kind of getting to the end of these steps that we're suggesting, I want to use an example here as to kind of put it, make it real. So for me, I know that someone else wrote in the chat that after divorce, it cured a whole bunch of stuff for them. So I've been divorced twice, and in the middle of a third marriage that has been a fantastic relationship up to this point. But in the past, there was this pain of losing connection with my partner. So the commitment that we made to each other was to have a life that's growing together, a life that is actually on our terms in many ways. And the commitment was between the two of us, to the point that she said she would never get married again. And she asked me to marry her because of the tightness and the bond that we had. But I think that's because we did set up little connection rituals for us that made sense. So the one like intentional practice that we do, which we actually did just last night, was once a month, one of us plans a date night for the two of us. That's a surprise to the other, so that we actually both can show kind of through the energy of the choices that we're making and the time that we're spending together is that experience. And sometimes it has been climbing a 4,000-foot mountain. It's also, doing a scavenger hunt in the middle of February in Manchester. We froze our asses off. And other times it's actually the spa day and it's the pampering. And it really has actually been one of those steps and one of those things that I actually do track that. I actually have a gallery in my Notion space that is the adventures that we've been on. To kind of record and remind myself of, this is how we've built a great relationship that we have. And then in every day and every moment, I'm intentional in expressing to her how important she is to me and how grateful I am that she's in my life, to the point that she rolls her eyes because it sounds so corny. But at the same time, it's one of the reasons why she enjoys spending time with me. It comes back to that humor of mine and the values that we started off with, because we enjoy our time. And it's not the crap, I need to schedule another date night. Yeah. That's not the context for it. It's, I get to spend time with my partner. Or I get to actually let go of the reins for a night, and my wife has actually planned everything, and I show up and enjoy the time that she's invested so much of her energy into. And it's then, to me, that's how we do our relationship 50-50. Is we do this as a team, and we alternate who's leading, and it works really well for us.
And guys, if you're listening, think of the level of intentionality in this. There's no accident. This is by design. This is relationship success by design. This requires thought, right? So let's go through these steps. Michael, your values, the values of commitment, planning, commitment to rekindling and keeping connection. You've also talked in the past about having family dinners.
It was much the same process as once a month, because I want to keep our family connected on a regular basis. Luckily, our kids are all in the same geographic area within an hour of each other. Yeah. But getting everybody together once a month is one way that we actually keep that connection going. And it's because that is valuable to me. I value that highly, having that connection with my family, and so does my wife. So we make time for that. And another example of that, we do a monthly game night where we invite our friends. So so that's those three relationship categories. I've got a monthly ritual for each of them: love, relationship, parenting, and social. And that has for me been how I brought my intention and my preparation and my planning, because of the pain that I've experienced from being disconnected from family, from friends, and from my partner. I had attempted to do these type of rituals before, and they didn't work in those relationships. But I'm in a different place right now, and my intention is different. My commitment is different. And this is something that, because I've actually, we had 12 people here for a game night last month. I'm not sure if anybody, any games you can play with 12 people. There's not a lot. But it was we laughed, we joked, we had fun, and it was bringing people together. And it wasn't for a business meeting, it wasn't to sell anybody, it wasn't anything like that. It was just to bring people together to laugh And because of that, there's so much more that is possible for me, because I know that I've got connections with people on that level, and I can also then go to those other places because we've built that rapport, we've built that social
Mhm.
structure, that fabric of family relationship and social connection.
I love it. Guys, I don't know what you think, but I think that's badass. I think that's a beautiful example for all of us. And I know that many of us have those examples in our own life. You know, for me, probably the area that I am the most intentional in is my health, and it's because I have to be. But I love it, Michael. Thank you for sharing all of that. So, how do people start? Like, what's out there that can help us bring more intentionality and address the sabotage in our life?
So there's practices we can do alone, which I think are important and really necessary, and there's also practices we can do in a community. And I
Mm,
think that both in many ways can be very powerful. So as an example, one of the places that I start with is acknowledging what I love about my life is one of the first places to diminish sabotage. So for me, the way that shows up is a gratitude calendar. Every day I write 3 things that I'm actually grateful for. And I know some people do 10, 20, 50, whatever works for you. For me, it's actually starting from this place of gratitude, because when we're in a space of gratitude, I know for me, I'm less likely to sabotage myself and turn myself in the wrong direction. So it is that regular reflective practice that to me starts with gratitude.
mhm.
So that can also be for any of the other things that you do in your life, of actually being willing to go back and do what some people would call a after action review. Because how did that particular event go? How did that meeting go? How did that conversation go? And sometimes that is in that relationship, is once you've had one of those deep, heartfelt, authentic conversations, check in with the person and say, how did that go for you? What came up for you?
Mm.
I think that's another way where we can diminish this level of sabotage, when we can actually really know where we're at, as well as the people that we're interacting with are at. I think that another thing is, like we touched on a little bit when we talked about the steps, as far as, recognizing the pain that we're in and making that decision to move away. But there's also this opportunity to disrupt the pattern with something creative, something spontaneous, whenever we see we're going down the wrong path. Sometimes we need that trigger from the outside, of somebody actually making fun of you because you've chosen to date the same person again, or from this place of, not because I'm trying to push you down, but because I'm trying to wake you up. And I think that can be necessary. I know that in one of the Tony Robbins events, you actually do something that you would never do in public, just to change the pattern of the idea of this story you've made up in your head that is totally false, because you're doing something that is so far out of your comfort zone that it actually anchors that moment while you're doing it, because it's so far outside your comfort zone. So finding ways to disrupt this pattern, and maybe it's a keyword you have with your friends, rubber baby buggy bumpers, that's something that you normally wouldn't say in conversation, that is the reminder of, hey, you're doing that thing again, that thing of the rut that you get into when you sabotage yourself.
Yeah, that's accountability with your
It
friends.
is. It is.
Hmm.
And I think that one of the other pieces too, that one of those other tools is, I know that we on one of the last one of the events that I was on recently, talked about role models to some degree, and having someone who is having some of the same outcomes that you're looking for can be an example for what you want to take on for yourself. Not that you're going to consume their whole life, but they can be a resource for steps that you can take in order to head in that direction. If someone has actually done really well at losing weight, someone who has actually started from where you're at and gotten to where you want to go can be a good example. But like for me, Arnold Schwarzenegger is not a good example of where I want to go, because he started at 14 becoming who he was at his peak. I wasn't
Never too
there at
late.
14.
It's never too late. Don't give yourself an excuse.
It's not, what I'm saying is that there are going to be tactics that I'm going to use that are going to be different than the
Sure.
way that he did. So
Sure.
I'm never going to be Arnold and Mr. Universe, but I can certainly be strong. I can be powerful. There are ways that I can do that. I've got ideas, and I've started moving in that direction myself already. But it is really a matter of taking on those attributes that you want in order to head in that direction. So as an example of what's possible, to really kind of give yourself an idea of, it's not always just for someone else, that only other people can do it. That's one reason why I like listening to podcasts, watching videos on YouTube about people who have overcome adversity, especially stuff if it's similar to what I've overcome. But I also love this statement of, don't ever take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from. Meaning, if someone gives you a hard time and they're not living the way that they are saying you should be living, why is their criticism of value? If they are not someone that you would actually take instruction from on how to do it, maybe they're not the person to actually take the criticism, the judgment from. But lastly, as kind of the name of our session here is, be intentional with the steps you're taking rather than being unconscious. Really choosing what it is that you want in your life, because if you're here on this Zoom session, you have access to technology, you are connected with a community. Making intentional choices is within your purview. You have this as ability on whatever scale that's actually the next step for you. So please use that, because with that power comes the responsibility that you get to choose, and your outcome is going to be based on your choices. So please do that intentionally.
This is really a long conversation on alignment, because the goal is to choose those actions, behaviors, thoughts, and beliefs that are in alignment with your values, that are in alignment with your goals. It's really about alignment. And sabotage is when we are just severely out of alignment. You know, we sometimes knock ourselves out of alignment, prevent ourselves from alignment. And that goes to the heart of what we believe. So, absolutely. Michael, what do you think is the right starting place?
I think I'm going to bring it back to one of these statements that we came up with for one of our takeaways, is that self-sabotage, when you have sabotaged yourself, in my opinion, is when you're at your worst. That's not your identity. That's the bottom, not the average or the top. Your potential is so far above that, but it is a good guidepost of, do not enter, wrong direction, turn around, change where you're going. And it's possible for each of us to do that and break the patterns that we're in.
There's some brilliance in there that I want to bring out, guys. He said at that moment of sabotage, we're at our worst. And what I want to do is take that so that we know, don't pin or peg your belief about yourself on your moment of weakness, on your worst moment, because that's the moment when you're out of alignment with who you are. So don't judge yourself based on your mistake. Don't judge yourself based on your sabotage. Judge yourself based on your intentions, your beliefs, and know that you can get there. Again, we all, oh gosh, you know, if you end up in prison for stealing something, are you going to call yourselves call yourself a thief for the rest of your life? Are you going to brand yourself? Michael and I similarly share an opinion about Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, where they have to continually remind themselves that they're an alcoholic. And I don't believe in life sentences. I believe that we're so much more than our worst mistake. So if you are hung up on judging yourself at that point, that moment of weakness, let it go. You're so much more. You're so much more. Even as we fall into patterns, you're more. And every time you repeat that pattern of sabotage, you're simply forgetting you're more. We're all more. So, what's holding you back, guys? What's showing up for you? One of our takeaways that we really want you to feel, to know and believe, is that patterns can be broken at a moment's notice. Patterns can be broken forever, starting today. And if you mess up, starting tomorrow. And if you mess up, starting the next day. It's okay. Patterns can be broken. We are all, another important message, we're creators. We're powerful creators. So you're creating whether you like it or not. If you don't like where you are, you've created that too. So create intentionally. This is the magic of life. We create our reality. Patterns can be broken, and we create our reality. And when you do mess up, don't judge yourself at that point. You're more. You're more. And just say that to yourself. I'm more than this. We know you know, and that's why you're here. And that's why we love to see you. And that's why we can't wait to see you when you come back. So we want to open it up though. What's showing up for you right now? What's an area of sabotage that you might be needing some help with? Michael, what are you working on?
So physical health is one of the pieces that I'm definitely working on for sure. Just started a workout routine a couple weeks ago after having a long hiatus off of it. So I'm still in that getting used to it phase of, wow, this pain is here, but this pain is helpful. This is the growing pain of it. I want to attach what you just asked and what you just stated to where we started to.
Yeah.
Is when we talk about being more, we can use things like, I am more kind, I am more confident, I am more courageous than this.
Those
I am
goals,
more
those
free,
values.
I am more compassionate, I am more humorous than this. Use that towards, you are more of who you were meant to be. You are more of the inner light, the higher self, the spirit, pick your term, and use that to embrace your possibility, your potentiality of the effect you can have to serve yourself and others in the world. What are you working on right now as far as deactivating self-sabotage?
I'm always working on a lot. For me, always health. Always, always, always. I just have big health orders always. So there is a monotonous time staking. It takes over an hour. Exercise I need to do pretty much, like, it would be great if I did it every day for the rest of my life. It's more like a stretching routine, and it's boring. And I hate it. Yet I feel great when I do it. Right. And it's for scoliosis. So it's not like going to the gym where you get these high endorphins and afterwards you're like, ah, it's boring. And I've done it at the gym before and somebody thought I passed out because I was standing still for so long. They're like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm just doing this weird stretch that nobody can detect. So that's one. The discipline to do that every day. I keep sabotaging that. Right. So that's something I'm working on. I talked about I'm having like I'm fasting from all streaming in July because I need to read more. I'm sabotaging my reading with streaming and stuff. So that's going to stop. Goodness, I could go on, but I want to hear from you guys. Yvonne, what you got going on?
I'm sabotaging my evening routine with we'll call it screen time. And I have my morning routine absolutely down pat. So sometimes at the end of the day and it's got, I think, 6 of my sacred choices in my morning routine. So sometimes I almost justify, well, at least I got my morning done. I'm halfway there, but I've really noticed that the morning starts the night before. And when I do my workout in the morning, I'm feeling a lot more tired. And I think I would benefit more if I would get my evening routine down pat. And I don't know if I'm just out of oomph by then, or I don't know what it is, but it's terrible. And I just don't know. It's been a struggle. When did I implement it? In January? So that's 6 months. And I still, and the morning routine, I am like absolutely flawless on my morning routine. But I just don't know what it is about my evening routine. And I know when I get that, I will, my whole next day, not just my morning routine, but I think it will snowball into just being a more successful week. I just don't know what I'm missing there.
Yeah. A lot of times also, because especially in the personal growth and development community, we're all about morning routines, evening routines, etc. So many people try to adopt things, and honestly, what works for everyone else may not work for you. I think it has to be very unique and individualized according to your energy. I mean, your diet can affect that, definitely, and just who you are. So if you listen to business leaders like Alex Hormozy, he's like the anti-routine person. He's like, my morning routine, I get up and work. And it's totally counter to what everyone else in the coaching side does. So, maybe you need a different kind of self-care in the evening. And it's just navigating that. Michael, do you have any input on that?
Well, I had more of a question is, what are you going to do over the next month to change something about that story in your head that you are horrible at your evening routine? Because you have an evening routine, it's just not the one you want.
That is so true. And that's a very valid point. And just my evening routine is literally stop eating after 8, screen time off at 10, and in bed at 11. It's not complicated.
Okay.
It's not it's just go to bed. That's all it is.
I love it.
So what's the first one you're going to tackle?
My morning routine is far more complicated. And I think you just summed it up. Is I just created someone else's, my own, just not the routine I wanted. But literally, it is just stop. It's a very simple. It's not even a routine. I think it's a habit.
Yeah.
So, Vaughn, what's the one you want to do
stopping
flawlessly for the next month? What's the one you're going to focus on for the next month to do flawlessly?
Stop eating at 8.
Okay.
Because that improves if I get less sleep, at least it's a better quality.
Okay. Awesome.
And so that's and have something healthy at 8, and then, because once we go past that, we're just eating junk food, in my opinion, for me.
Mhm.
So it's not healthy choices after that. So it'll that's what I'm gonna do.
Okay. Gotcha. So when you join us next month, I will check in with you to
Yes.
see how that habit went. We
Yes,
will hold you
Yvonne.
accountable.
Love
Okay.
it.
Awesome.
I'll focus. I'll commit.
Perfect. Thank you,
I'll
Yvonne.
commit to my plan.
Excellent.
Awesome. Anyone else? Cool.
So for those of you who have followed us up to this point, we do one of these every single month. And I know we actually did introduce ourselves this time. It was
I
one of the
know.
first times we have it.
Yeah.
But we do one of these sessions about elevating your life once a month. So we've actually done things like obstacle to adversity this year, as well as blame to ownership. Next month, we're actually talking about moving from selfishness to generosity. Because in this space of everyone wanting something from you, we feel like the route to go is actually be generous with your compassion, be generous with your energy, be generous with your focus and your time, because it's important, especially in those relationships that are of importance to you. And we look forward to seeing you. We're going to be doing that on July 29th. So basically 4 weeks from today. And we look forward to seeing you. It'll be at the same time. We'll be posting that up on the platform and on LinkedIn as well. Any other questions from those of you who have joined us on this Saturday that we can help answer?
Questions,
Guide?
feedback, anything? Okay. Beautiful.
Well, thank you, everyone. We really do appreciate you spending this time with us, for the feedback, which you've actually written in the chat, as well as coming on and sharing with us. We enjoy having these conversations, and we do want it to be an interactive experience for us. Yes, Suzanne and I have talked quite a bit about this, but we hope that you've actually gained something from this conversation about moving from saboteur to intentionality. And I look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you. Have a beautiful weekend, guys.